Markus, let's start with you. When you look at the global energy transition, what do you see as the current state of play for AI and data centers? And again, how much energy will it use? I mean, sometimes I look at the numbers and I have to read it 3 times because they're so massive.
Yeah. So being in energy and especially in power, electricity, it's a great outlook. We know that there's more demand for our product through the electrification, but especially through the AI and data center boom. But on the other hand, you also know and realize that we are probably the facilitator, but currently also the bottleneck. I mean, how fast we actually see deployment of new data centers, and we need to overcome these hurdles.
Julian, how much more do we need to build from what we have now?
I mean, the view, there are 2 things that are, it's a huge change for our industry. Let's start with that. For the last 10 years in the developed world, investments in power have been essentially replacing technology. So there was no real hurry. You know, a coal plant was closed and a lignite plant was closed, and then you were put in a new plant. Now our job is, accelerated investment. So jobs, taxes. So it opens a completely different world for us. We now live with an urgency that's tremendous. The idea is that, not only that, it's also a race. AI is a race. Whoever gets there first will win. We've seen that in most of the information technology business. It's a winner takes it all. So we need to help our economies win that race, and we need to move as fast as we can to be able to deliver that. That's the second one. And the third one, connected to this, is that I think, and this will come from clearly conflict, my own opinion, but that there's no way of meeting the needs of the power of the AI revolution without renewables. There's no way. We will need gas, we will need nuclear, we'll need all this stuff, but there's no way. Renewables will play a fundamental role in that process. And we need to get ready for it.
And Markus, will that be accelerated? I mean, again, to Julian's point, this has to be at speed. This needs, an enormous amount of capital being deployed. So what's the hardest part of what you're trying to achieve right now?
If you look at the individual pieces, it's not so problematic, but getting all ducks in a row, because it needs a lot of things to bring more power to the market. It all starts with permitting and planning. And that was actually across the globe, also in the US, but especially also in Europe. It was always slow because of the reason Julian explained. It was only replacing existing capacity, but now we need to build additionally more. Second is supply chain. And especially global supply chain in an environment where you have geopolitical tensions and discussion about tariffs make huge investments more complicated. You need to get your head around that. And then, of course, the infrastructure, so upgrades on the grid, and then additional generation technology. And I'm with Julian, it needs to be an all of the above strategy. We should do our research on fusion for maybe in the next generation. Nuclear remains to be seen, but very long timeline. We definitely need wind, solar, and battery solutions, and a good message, especially for Qatar. A lot of gas will be needed for much longer.
So if we focus on RV, I think your power generation has been declining since 2021, right? Now, because of AI, how much are you expecting to increase it by, and in what time frame?
So what I see, we operate in the US and in the European Union and UK. What I see is the US is much faster and ahead of the curve. We expect power demand to grow by 3 to 5% per annum, depending on the different regions. Europe will pick up a bit later and slower, but from all the discussions we have to also make our infrastructure available to facilitate new data centers, it's going to come. Maybe not at the same pace, but it will come, and I expect breakthrough, as you have also seen with the first announcement yesterday in France. I expect the same for my home country, Germany, UK, more to come, but maybe 2 years later.
Julian, are politicians having, first of all, the right conversations? Because, again, a year ago, everyone was saying, look, this is something that we need to fix about, but it was never #1 priority for government. So, first of all, has the language, has the immediacy of it actually changed?
I think the challenge we have today, I think that there are different things, but I will call you, I think the main change, if you ask me, what I think will make a big difference is at the regulatory level.
Right.
As we were for 10 years, just replacing technology, regulators got used to this idea that you could take time. A project could wait a year. At the end of the day, the electrons were not going to be, the electrons that come out of a coal plant are not any different than the electrons that come out of a gas plant. You know, they're not any different. But now that those electrons are feeding businesses, jobs, taxes, schools, you know, opportunities, well-being, speed is essential. We cannot wait 2 years for an interconnection. It needs to happen. So if you ask me, that's where we need to see the change. I think from the government side, generally there's a recognition that power will play an important role. I think from the markets, the financial markets are very supportive, so we haven't had an issue. That is where the trick needs to go. And the second point that I think we need to be, where we need to probably make a change is that I think we need to be agnostics about what's the solution that best meets each of our needs, you know? So all of the above, to ensure that we actually can do things at the speed we need to do them, you know? Because there are a lot of solutions that sound very good, that will play a significant role, but that will take 4 years. 4 years from now, you won't be able to catch up with the Chinese AI. You won't be able. If you have to wait for that, it won't happen. You know?
But
I would like to add one thing what has also changed. I think politicians have not only realized that it's about speed, it's also about safety and security, because it is critical infrastructure, the power infrastructure as well as the data infrastructure. And we need to find the right balance between speed and protecting your data, but also protecting your critical infrastructure. And especially from recent events, we have seen the big blackout on the Iberian island, but also the messages from the US, what they found in certain devices out of Asia. That will play a very relevant role how we set up this entire energy and data infrastructure.
I know Julian says you have to be agnostic, but actually how much does security and price come into play? Because maybe the two are at odds instead of working hand in hand.
I think you have two aspects of that question. One is your infrastructure safe? Yeah? And do you control it? It's a critical infrastructure, and if it breaks down, it has severe impacts on lives, on society. And the other, but that is only true for certain regions, definitely not the US, not the GCC region, but it's relevant for many parts of Europe, for Japan, Korea, where many of the energy currently needs to be imported. Yeah? And of course, how do you create a diversified energy import landscape, but also where can you actually reach more independence? And there, of course, nuclear and renewables are one way to get more independence.
I completely agree on the cybersecurity, and I will add, completely agree. That's the other point that we need to diversify the supply chain of our industry. We cannot have a supply chain that's dependent on one country. Not because, any country is good or bad, but, just bad policy. So I think it's very, very important that we work on bringing that supply chain to, diversified. We clearly want competition, we want lower prices, we all want all of that, but we cannot be dependent upon one country only. It doesn't work.
I was going to ask you actually about supply chains, given all of the turmoil and tariffs and trade wars. Like if you look at the energy complex, for example, how many battery cells comes from China, and how much will that change because of Trump policy?
Today, it's interesting, batteries, because the patents for batteries, so all the basic research for batteries were done in the US and Japan. None of them came out of China. In the 1950s and then over time, up to today, the LFP batteries, which are the most common batteries, were developed in MIT. Yeah. But right now what happens, all the supply chain is in China. And that, I think, it's nothing against Chinese. I think the Chinese have brought this industry and have continued to provide lower prices, and they have done a great job. But we cannot depend on one country, and that I think is a concern. No?
But apart from batteries, what other components?
Oh, the batteries are essentially Chinese. I think the other ones where we see a major concern. I think I would say batteries is the one where we have the highest concentration. Then I think it will be solar panels will be the second one. Wind is it's a lot more diversified because of the way it works. We are working, in Fluence, we're working very hard to bring our supply chain into the US. And we today have the ability to do a project fully 100% made in the US, very much dependent on the Inflation Reduction Act, so if it changes, that will probably be a little bit more difficult. We're doing it today, but we do believe that diversity of supply is fundamental for it to work.
Markus, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the U.S. So data centers warn that actually, the president's attack on green energy could hurt U.S. in this AI race by creating power bottlenecks. Do you share these concerns?
I think the U.S. administration is definitely right on two things. One is energy is important, and energy is because energy will fuel the next big wave of data and the AI economy. Second is you need to have a consistent policy on infrastructure, supply chain, and the incentive to bring back supply chain to the regions, to the US. Europe should do actually the same, is also right. Where I disagree, and there I'm with Julian, I would be technology agnostic, because it needs to be an all-of-the-above strategy. We need to build everything which can be built as fast as possible because the demand is there. And we could actually build twice of what we currently build. We have a 5 gigawatt under construction in the US from the demand side, right. From the tech companies and data centers. But we cannot go faster because of supply chain and uncertainties around tariffs. So my advice would be clear that table, that we have more certainty. And I don't care so much what they incentivize, what they prefer, but I want to have investment clarity. And with the tariffs looming and can go up again, you go slower with investments, which is actually the opposite of what is needed.
That's right.
But the future, so staying in the US, the future of the Inflation Reduction Act, frankly, is still unclear. So what does that mean, for example, for your commitment in the US to renewables?
The moment I have a stable investment environment and I know what I need to procure locally, what I can still import, and I know potential incentive schemes, I can sit, I can calculate my projects, I can approach the off-takers and say, I can deliver you power at that price and we get a deal or not. The moment it's unstable and you don't know to put what into your business case, you pause, you go slower. Yeah?
So this pauses basically everything, right? It means that the race will be slower just because of the uncertainty.
I mean, the uncertainty creates a problem. Clearly, people don't want to commit not knowing what will happen in the short term. No, so I will say if there's any advice, quote unquote, or recommendation, let's settle the policy discussions quickly. Yeah. Uncertain policy is worse than bad policy. Uncertain policy is worse than bad policy. Having said that, I think the Inflation Reduction Act, I know that the current administration has a very critical view of that law, so, played a significant role in bringing in supply chains to the U.S. And I think that's something we should not get lost. You might criticize parts of it. There were things that were very political about it. But I'm not going to get into the details, but that portion we should not get. That idea of bringing the supply chains to the U.S. is very much a MAGA idea. I'll put it that way. That supply chain, and I think that hopefully when the Republicans are looking at this law, they realize that the incentives in the law that allow to bring the supply chain to the U.S. is very much aligned with the Trump administration policy.
I would like to build on that because for us as a developer and then building and operating the generation capacity, it's very important to de-risk your investments. And the moment you can buy domestic, it's a big de-risking exercise for your projects because you don't depend on tariff or geopolitical tensions. And it's interesting to see that over the last 4 years, the supply chain within the US have been strengthened. It's easier for us to buy batteries and solar panels domestic in the US than it is in Europe. In Europe, it's non-existing, and that was part of the policy which was helpful to get it done.
Could I have a snapshot, actually, of some of the conversations? And I know you're agnostic in terms of technologies, but what do you think the energy complex looks like in 5 years from now? So how much offshore, onshore, solar, wind, and actual, maybe fusion and others?
I can give you my opinion. We are a battery storage company, so I think my opinion, the markets are going to be, and I'm in Qatar, so gas and renewables. LNG. So that gas and renewables. I think that some of the other ideas that people fall in love with that look wonderful when you read them or look at the labs reports and stuff are not going to happen. There's nothing better than gas and renewables to feed.
And batteries.
And batteries are, you'll need both gas and renewables help with, need batteries. So that's, but I think those two elements are going to be, I think that's what's going to drive the future of power for the next years.
Basically, I agree. I mean, I'm not so much. I'm not interested in what the stack looks like, but what the additional investments look like. So what you add actually, and there I think it's clear that we need storage technology. So batteries, it's good for your business, Julian. Needed in any case. We definitely need more gas. And then the question mark is, what is the rest? And there I would look at the timelines. I hope that we get a breakthrough in fusion technology, because that would solve the energy problems, not of our generation, but the next and the next one. But we cannot wait for that. But I mean, we should not give up on that. But short term, it is, and I fully agree, it's a combination of renewables, batteries, and gas. Nuclear, in whatever type, will take much longer, and you can also not add significant capacity, even if in the most optimistic cases for nuclear and SMRs in the US, it's by the mid-30s, it's still a rounding error.
How does the growth of AI actually in Germany and Europe delay or jeopardize the exit from coal due to the enormous amount of power we need?
I think that is clear. The slower we are with building new, cleaner technology, the higher the utilization of the old dirty stuff. And we see that everywhere. We have seen that in the US, we see that in Europe. So it's important to get the new technology in the ground.
But how do you see that? I mean, again, I think you want to phase out coal in Germany by 2030. And when do you know whether that gets delayed or advanced?
I don't care so much about the exact date, because you can only close a capacity when you have built new one. But the utilization needs to go down. And that is the important thing. Whether we close it then 30 or 35 as a country, we have as a company have a clear plan. We will get out by 2030. The country might need it longer.
I mean, I'm concentrating in how to serve the new demand, not the old one. So, hey, the coal, might take a little longer, but at the end of the day, I think the real solution, as I said, gas and renewables. No?
In the couple of minutes we have left, I wanted to ask you about money. We touched on it a little bit, but do you feel in general that there's enough capital being deployed in the right places, that there is enough money for this, because it has gone up the priority list for governments, but also for investors? Do people understand it, Julian?
We do. I mean, I think that our customers do very well, and we haven't seen a major issue getting up to now. I mean, maybe things will get worse or will get more difficult over time, but the capital markets, like electricity, like the business, they like the return. So I don't see a problem raising the.
Same for you, Markus?
Capital is not the problem the moment you have good investments. But if the investments are uncertain, the investors are also much more. We see that as a public. There's a big debate on our shareholder base. It's public that parts say the investments are currently so uncertain in the environment with tariffs and other. You better go slower. And I think we need to strike the right balance to work across the value chain, but also with regulators, politicians, to de-risk the project, because only when they are de-risked, we can get the capital at attractive returns. Yeah.
But I guess politicians understand that this is a race against other big superpowers. And if that's the case, do you think it sharpens and focuses the mind of politicians on what to do with regulation and uncertainty?
My view is it always sounds like that we discuss issues all the time, which is the right thing, because we actually everybody focuses on what needs to be done to go faster in the right direction. And I'm actually optimistic. I'm a strong believer in market forces, and I'm also a strong believer that in the end, maybe it takes some longer and we are all impatient, but that we work across. And many things have been achieved. When you look at infrastructure bills, also in the West, things can go faster than they were 5 years ago. If we move that direction, I'm optimistic.
What are you most optimistic about, Julian?
Hey, I think that changed from the fact that, we were an industry replacing technology to an industry that's now playing an essential role in the main race that we have today, the race for artificial intelligence. So I think that puts a pressure on us to do our jobs better, to think about technology, to think of new ideas. And it also puts a pressure on the people that regulate us to ensure that they give us the certainty and the guidance to ensure that we can make the big investments and create the technology and the projects fast. So excited about that. Hopefully 5 years from now we'll be here and we will be talking about the next chapter.
Yeah. What will we speak about in 5 years? What will we have fixed?
I think we basically probably discuss still the same problems. I think there will be a stronger focus on the security aspect. And if every region has sorted out a security aspect, maybe we start talking even a bit more about global collaboration again.
There you go. We'll speak before 5 years.
That's
Thank
right,
you
yeah,
for a good
that.
panel. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.